Hello friends, this is Tisha from Meadows and Mortar by Tisha, and today we are doing that super cute Dolly Parton jewelry armoire. So as you can see, after I gave it a good clean and a good rinse off with some water, I'm using Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer. I'm using the gray color of the primer, and as you can see, this did not have a lid on it. Whenever my sister-in-law bought this for me from an estate sale, it did not have a lid. So I just used a cabinet door and cut it down to size and then put it on the hinges and made that a lid. After this all dries for about 24 hours, I'm coming in with Paint Couture's Extreme Guard. This is what I'm going to be using as my decoupage medium. You can use any sort of clear coat that you want. There are actual decoupage mediums out there, just whatever you prefer to use. I really like this Extreme Guard. I use it for a lot of my projects. So this decoupage paper that I'm using, the company that I got this from was PBJ Prints. Unfortunately, they went out of business, so I'm not sure where you can buy this print at now. Before I laid it on here, I had a mister bottle full of water, and then I just sprayed the back of it. What this is going to do is this is going to release the fibers in that paper, and it's just going to make them swell up a little bit so it can be more conformable. And once that it hits that decoupage medium on the back, it's not going to cause wrinkles because it's already wet. So we're not taking a dry paper and putting it on something wet. We've already expanded those fibers, so we're going to get less wrinkles. So I lay down the decoupage medium in a pretty even coat all the way across, and then I take that moist paper and I lay it down over top of it, and then I just use the pads of my fingers to smooth it all down. And I want to make sure that I'm getting inside of each one of those creases where the drawers are. So I'm just taking kind of the edge of my fingernails and just smoothing it in those areas. Now this side part right here, it was a little trickier because it's rounded, and I'm using a flat paper that I've already put in the crevices of the drawers to try to put over top of this. So what I end up doing is I make a couple slits in the side of the paper, and then I roll it around the drawer. And this lets me be a little more forgiving. Once that the paper is dried, you're not going to see those slits. You're not going to be able to see that I've done that at all. But that's a good way to go around curved surfaces like that. Just make some tiny little slits in it, and you're going to have more surface area to work with because you're going to be able to tuck that under parts of it and over parts of it, and it's going to look like it's laying a lot more flatly. Alternatively, you could actually slice that side down and just use that paper by itself to roll around there. That would have been easier, but I just didn't do that. And then once that I realized that I had not done that, my paper was already wet, and I didn't want to try to cut it and then mess up that line right there. So this area over here on the right, it did not extend all the way around where that rolly part is, so I just decided to cut it off. Now my paper, where I had worked with it for such a long time here, it had pretty much dried, so I didn't have to worry about making jagged edges or anything because it was dried on that side pretty much. So now I have a little strip at the bottom, and it's where my paper was not long enough for this. So I'm just taking little pieces of that part that I cut off of the right side, and I'm just putting them on the bottom. Is it going to be a perfect match? No, it's not. But unless you're really looking for it, you're not going to notice it. So this background is pretty abstract. So as long as I have similar colors down towards the bottom, it's still going to look nicely. Then I come back in with my Extreme Guard, and I'm going to go over the top of all of it, wanting to make sure that I really get inside of those cracks where the drawers are, where the sides are. I want to make sure that my sides are good and glued down. And this is going to dry overnight, and then once that it dries, then I can come back in with a razor blade and I can just trim everything up. So now I'm going to go in where each one of those drawers are, where the side is that opens up. I'm just using a straight edge razor and just trimming off the excess. You want to make sure that this is dry before you do that though. You saw I added a little applique at the bottom, and now I'm using Paint Couture in the colors Driftwood and Pinecone. Now Driftwood is what I'm going to be using over the majority of the piece, and then I'm taking the Pinecone, which is my darker color, and then I'm using that to blend upward in sort of the areas that I'm wanting to accentuate at the bottom of the feet where the appliques are, and then at the top I'll do it at the corners. So I'm taking Paint Couture Metallic, their aged bronze stencil paste. This is already thickened to where it's perfect to make a raised stencil. Now the reason that I decided to do a raised stencil on the top of this is because where I used a cabinet door to make this top that I had cut down, it was a old handmade cabinet door, and it has a little bit of wave to it. You can kind of see it right there where the edge of the container is, and I wanted to mask that a little bit. It just was a tiny little bit of wave. I felt like this would really draw your eye away from it. So now I'm going to show you guys how I do the blending. This is my second coat of blending, so this is where I really try to perfect my blending. So I'm just going to take that Driftwood after I use my mister bottle to lay on a nice thin coat of water. The reason that I use that mister bottle of water is because this is a chalk paint, so it's going to be very porous. If I use that mister bottle, instead of it soaking up all of this paint, it's going to glide over the top of that base layer first, and then it'll let me blend together. So you can see I took that Driftwood and I brought it pretty much all the way down the leg. Now I'm taking my Pinecone, and a little goes a long way. And I'm starting at the very bottom, and then I'm working my way up. And I'm not sure if you noticed whenever I put the Pinecone on there, I used a very, very little amount of paint. So I'm just working it up into where the Driftwood is. And then I'm going to take the Driftwood, and then I'm going to come back down. So I'm going to toggle these colors together, really make sure that they're blended good together. And then I'm going to take a dry neutral brush that does not have any product on it, and then I'll feather it all together. Now these two colors together, this Pinecone has a little bit of a pinkish undertone to it. So whenever I mix these together, this is going to sort of look like a dusty pink if you look at it in some lights, and then some lights it's going to look brown. And I thought that this was going to work nicely with this paper because it does have browns in it, but it also has those pinks in it, so I thought this would be perfect. This is my dry neutral brush right here. So you saw I already had those two colors that I had put on there together, and then I had pretty much, blended them together with, as much as I could with actual paint on the brushes. So now I'm using that dry brush, and then I'm just feathering them all together. I go up and down, I'll go side to side, I'll go diagonals, and then you can see I brought a little too much of that Driftwood down towards the foot, so I'm just adding a little bit more of the Pinecone just to darken up the feet a little bit, and then I'm working it back in together. So just because you mess up, if you bring one color down too much or one color up too much, you can work with it. So this is what it looks like after it's all blended in on that leg. So the goal is that you're not going to be able to see where one color starts and one color stops. You want them to seamlessly kind of meld into each other. Legs are not the easiest thing to try on whenever you're very first starting. I would try on a flat surface first, but you can absolutely do legs. So I'm doing, the main color of Driftwood over the majority of it, but then you can see I'm doing accents on the front part of right there where that cabinet door comes out. I'm doing it on the sides of the top, and then I'll do it on the very top where the stencil is. So although I'm wanting the main color to be light, I want you to be able to see like these really beautiful blends all over the whole piece. And that accent that I added at the bottom, that was an IFlex Appliqué. So what you do with those is you heat them up with a heat gun, and it makes them bendable, and then you just take some glue and then you add them on there. This is Paint Couture in the color French Rose. This is a very light pink color, and I'm just wanting it to accentuate the tops of these appliques. I'll add them sort of to anywhere that there is a place that's sticking out, the edges of those trims, the appliques, just anywhere that I'm wanting a good highlight. Now I want to show where I had that raised stencil. So you saw that I did the blend on the top of it. You can't see where one color starts and one color stops, but you can see it's darker on the outside, lighter on the inside. And then I'm coming in with a little bit of sandpaper and just hitting the tops of where this stencil is. What this is going to do is it's going to smooth out the top. You're not going to have any sort of jagged edges on it. This is Paint Couture's Perfect Pigments in the color Bronze, and then I'm going to just take a little dollop of that, and then I'm going to use some of their pigment medium, and I'm going to mix in with it. Whenever I mix these together, this is going to make a beautiful bronze color that you can paint with. You can use this as a gilding wax if you would like. You can use it as a regular paint if you would like. So I'm going to go over all of the areas that I added that French rose. I'm not going to hit, so whenever I use the French rose, I really did it kind of heavier deep into the molds. This I'm going to take and just hit over the top areas, and then I'm going to take what's left of my brush, what's left on my brush, which is going to leave a really thin film, and then I'm going to go over the bigger areas so it's not as concentrated, so I can still see that French rose peeping through on there. Now I'm going to come through and I'm going to paint all of the edges. I'm going to paint down some at the feet, around the appliques, and this is just wherever you want your eye to be drawn to, wherever you're wanting that little bit of shimmer to come through. You can see down there at the very bottom, I kind of come in on the sides a little bit, I smudge it together, I'm going around all of those drawers just to give it a little bit of shimmer. Now after this, I decide that I'm going to paint the hinges, and I was afraid to use this on the hinges because I didn't know if it would hold up because I've never used it on hinges before. So I end up coming in with gilding wax on that. So this is Paint Couture Extreme Guard in Satin, and this is what's going to seal everything in. This is going to make it nice and durable for me and make everything, really good for home use. I'm going to be able to use this like I would any other piece. This is just going to seal everything in and protect it. Now I'm adding in my hardware, so I'm trying to find where my holes were originally and put them in those, but then that would have been right over top of Dolly's eyes, so I had to make some new holes to go up over top of her eyes a little bit. So just be mindful of that whenever you're using hardware over a decoupage paper. So this is where I'm using that gilding wax. This is just a bronze gilding wax over top of the hardware and those hinges. And this is the final product. And guys, I hope that you've learned something. If you have any questions, just send me a message. I would be happy to try to answer them for you. If you're not already, follow my page, like this video, comment, subscribe to my page so that I can bring you guys more content. If you would like to use any of the products used, I will be listing that in the description link. And guys, I can't wait to see you all next time. Thanks so much for watching.